G'day, I'm Glenn Morris from the Smart Energy Lab. And today, in this rather rainy and cold day at Mount Tulibawong, I've got Guy Stewart from Victron Energy. G'day, Guy.
G'day, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so how was the trip up?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it's beautiful winding through the mountains. Like, it's my first time coming up to your place. I've heard about it for years. Of course, I've seen photos of the lab as well, but actually coming up the mountain is another experience again. So, just had to dodge a few rocks and trees on the way in, but other than that, beautiful.
It was actually one of the worst weather events in fact, in the 20 years I've lived here. In fact, the amount of rocks that were on the road when I came up home last night from the conference.
I've been collecting rocks. I'm building rock wall retainment near my place.
Okay,
so
you take some with you.
I've been collecting rocks from beside the road, so I had my eye on a few beauties, but I don't know if it's going to... Virgin Australia might not be into that.
I thought you drove down here.
No, I got a car from Melbourne, so my parents live in Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've got a caravan.
I saw the camper van too.
Yeah.
That was a big drive, I thought.
Well, they do it. They make that trip because I'm in northern New South Wales, up there, and I work remotely for the most part. But they make the trip up and visit the farm.
You had your own experience with La Nina?
Yeah, I did. It's been a pretty hectic time of the year for Australian weather. Hectic year overall. If you've seen or know of me before, it's probably through my online training videos and my work with Victron Community. My studio was destroyed in those floods, so I lost all my equipment and lost my production operation, everything. So it's all been set back, which is why it hasn't been one of the reasons. Hasn't been much new online training out of Victron in the past 12 months, but it's coming back slowly, and there's always new things to be doing at Victron, so it's easy enough to shuffle the deck a bit and find new opportunities.
Yeah, well, let's hope La Nina doesn't bring back another flood event for you. Is that the only factor in this wet weather we're having?
I'm better equipped now, I think. You try and strengthen your systems as they get tested. That goes for power systems as well as weather systems. And, being a renewable company where often our power systems are quite closely linked to the weather system, you have to become sensitive to that. And that's actually my background. So I came from permaculture, which is a holistic system thinking model where you do look at things like energy flows through a system, and then through that process found that renewable energy was actually my expertise and interest most directly. So that's where I went to focus on, but I still carry that holistic picture when thinking about property management or even system design to consider weather factors and other things as well.
Cool. That's a good segue to tell us a bit about your career and how you came to be... what's your title with Victron?
Yeah, it's a fluid thing. My official title is Victron Community Manager.
Yep.
That's my core area of responsibility.
Yep.
But I also do online training. So at the time I was online training manager and probably still is de facto. Victron, if you don't know much about the company itself, is there's no structure internally. It's like CEO is Matthias at the top. Everyone's an employee of Matthias, and there's no middle management. Like, I'm a manager, but I have no sub-employees, and no one other than Matthias can sort of direct me what to do, which really fosters a very cooperative and collaborative environment internally, and often a lot of fluidity to move between business units or operations as opportunity or need arises. It's a different way to do things, and the people who work there love it.
So how big, in terms of employees, is Victron Energy?
Yeah, so it's been hovering around 100 employees now for quite a few years. It ticks up a couple every few years, and then maybe one or two down. And it's a constraint, but it's also a constructive constraint.
Yeah.
And that's because Matthias wants to be able to keep a handle on the operations, and he does. He's able to know what's happening across the board in the company, and he has the aptitude to be able to follow all the products and the developments and everything without it becoming too structured and micromanaged is the issue. So that's we get a lot of autonomy internally to be able to do things with it.
Now, you've heard my story with Matthias, but my audience probably haven't. So I was having some support requirements, and I was dealing with support via email.
So you went through the level 3 system, was it?
I'm not actually sure what level I went to, but there was this support guy called Matthias who was responding to me, and he went quiet on me for a couple of weeks, and I was thinking, this is not very good.
Rude.
And I think I nudged the former Victron sort of rep down here in Melbourne and said, what's happened to the support? They're not responding. He said, actually, you've been talking to the CEO.
Yeah.
He's got a few things on his plate.
Yeah,
and I go, really? He actually jumps on support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a family company, and he cares about the product deeply. And look, to some degree, he's constrained with how much time he can give it because he has so many other responsibilities across the company. But he doesn't want to lose touch. He doesn't want to lose touch with the customers. He doesn't want to lose touch with the issues. He doesn't want to lose touch with the products. So he has Victron systems himself, like most of us do inside Victron. We live with it every day. And it can mean that you get your issue escalated to the CEO effective, who has, again, one-to-one relationships with everyone who needs to know or could possibly influence that, which is an incredibly effective change mechanism inside the organization. But sometimes it means, you don't get exceptional service from the CEO every day, especially if you get used to it, which is a problem I have as well. It means I need a lot of autonomy. And it's something we try at Victron to cultivate in our dealership network and in our end-use customers, actually. Like we try and be quite open with resources and information and things like that, training as well, so that people can self-empower themselves to learn. And people that take to that, who take responsibility and are willing to learn and not just have it like given to them or be able to get straight answers from someone straight away, they do really well inside the Victron ecosystem. They really thrive because there's a lot of opportunity for that self-development and self-growth and learning within that. And the ones that don't, well, they don't like Victron and they have a bad experience and move on to something else. And that's actually fine. We've been growing enormously. I think the industry as a whole has been growing enormously, but us especially. We've found our market, we've found our fit, and we're doing incredible business. And the model is robust enough now to handle that growth and also to support the people that want to be part of that system.
Yeah. With Victron Professional, it's really a self-help community too. So
exactly,
you just draw on the hive mind.
Yeah. And the hive mind includes the CEO and includes the engineers. And most organizations in the renewable energy industry, there's no opportunity to get access direct to the CEO and the hardware engineer that developed the product. It's not an opportunity that's open. So it does in some ways have its upsides as well as downsides.
I guess kind of like me too, when someone's asked you the same question 10,000 times, you start to create a quick solution to that. Maybe it's a video, some text explanation, and you can just send a link. So you've done that to me quite a few times. Like I think, look, I'm guys and my mate, I'll just ask him directly for how to do this, and he sends me back a link, sending me to Victron Professional.
Can't do it any better the second time.
That's right.
No, look, that's actually how I got my start in Victron, to tell you the truth. So I was a distributor. Once I finished with the permaculture work, I was doing training and education. I moved into the renewable energy industry and worked at Rainbow Power Company for 5 years, designing systems for customers, end-use customers, and my own system as well. And through that process, winnowed through all the other manufacturers' equipment, basically. I tried everything because I didn't have any bias one way or the other. And through those experiences, eventually settled on Victron myself and just got to know that system and became very confident and comfortable with it. And part of that is because of the way it was then and the way, to a degree, it is now. It involves trying to find answers to questions that aren't necessarily obvious, especially because we cover so many markets with so many products. We've got 1,000 SKUs. We cover every country in the world.
What's an SKU?
An SKU is a product number, basically. So every product that needs to be identified uniquely within the system. So we have MPPTs, we have inverter chargers, we have batteries and solar panels, but we also have a range within those. And then within each of those product ranges, we have different sizes within those. So,
like smart shunts and DC buses and...
Exactly. And MPPTs. So we have in the MPPT range, we have 4 or 5 different models of MPPTs, one with Bluetooth, one without Bluetooth, one that's at 150 volt, one that's at 450 volt. And then with each of those, we have size classes as well. So you end up with this enormous matrix of potential possibilities of products available. That's one of our unique offerings into the market. We have the biggest range of power electronics in the industry. Yeah,
I mean, you just open the catalogue and you've got to go to the right column. It's a book indeed. But it's an ecosystem.
It is. And that's the strength and that's what's growing. I mean, but there's been an amazing thing for Victron in the past few years with all of the supply challenges that have been happening across the industry. For one, we're not a just-in-time inventory operator. We have big inventory globally. So we weren't hit as hard as some of the operators who don't keep stock and don't keep supply, not just of product, but also of components. That was one element where we were able to carry on, not business as usual, but from a strength position. And the other one is that we have a lot of opportunity in ecosystem work. So we have this big range of products. We can continue to supply them, but then how do they interconnect? And how does the customer engage with that? And that software layer and that experience layer is where there's enormous opportunity for growth that really was not affected as much as micro semiconductor controllers and Bluetooth chips and logistics, which were really, it was wild for a while there. What was happening at a global level. That do you remember the Evergreen ship? What was it?
Yes.
Green? Yeah, I've forgotten the name of it. Anyway, that ship that blocked the Suez Canal for
Yes.
an indefinite period of time at one point. No one knew what was going to happen. They'd dig it out with this little excavator. That blocked one of the biggest trade channels in the world between China and America and the rest of Europe. So, when stuff like that happens at a global supply chain level, you can't be dependent on that one ship or that one supply chain. So we have a global supply chain. We have multiple manufacturing partners around the world, in China, as well as in Asia, as well as in India. So we're able to move flexibly with market conditions and other things like that.
So when you say you have 100 employees in Victron, they're not the manufacturers of the products. That's just the core R&D and management teams.
That's right. Right. So the structure of the organization is that the R&D is done in-house.
Yep.
It's a similar model in some ways to Apple, if you're comfortable or familiar with that one. So there's a head office in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and there's R&D PhDs, basically, who are doing the power electronic design. They build prototype there, but then when it comes time to scale to global production levels, we then have close partners that we've been working with for decades, basically, and they handle the manufacturing side. When I say we've got 100 employees at Victron, we've got 100 people winding transformer coils for one product. So that's not Victron employees, they're some other employee, and that allows us, as an organization, to maintain our flexibility. And also to scale when necessary, because we don't have to worry about those resources. We just have to trust our partners and have a diversity of partners to be able to work with for that manufacturing. The rain's just picked up again. The one potential issue with a model like that is, well, how do you ensure quality control, right? Because if you're not doing it yourself, how do you know that the right thing's getting done at the factory? And for that, we've got systems as well. Again, this has been the model since the beginning. Victron's now 45 years old. So we've been doing this a long time. And we have all the quality control metrics handled back at head office. So every unit gets quality controlled, and that quality control process is managed by us, right? Not by the factory necessarily.
So presumably Matthias didn't start the company 45 years ago.
No, he didn't. His dad did.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fully owned family business with no external debt. It's completely controlled and grown organically over 45 years. So his father, Reinhard, invented the first inverter, made it himself. There's a technical family for himself. So he was on a barge and he needed an inverter, so he built one. And then that became the first product. From there, here we are now, 45 years later, 1,000 products later, global reach and strong. It's one of the strengths of the company, that foundation. We're not owned by investors. We don't have any private equity. There's no risk to the operational model. They care about their brand and their company and their family. So they're there with a long-term vision and the capital to sustain that for a long term, and a model and a structure that lets them scale when necessary and scale back when necessary as well. So not that we've needed to do that for a long time.
Yeah. So in terms of product range, we already touched on that. It's extremely broad, right?
Yes.
So everything from the solar side to the battery side to control, monitoring, and now we'll come onto this in a little bit, and loads as well. I think it's probably one of your strengths is you really got a solution for every problem.
No, I agree. It's funny the way it works. We've got, like you said, our core competency is power electronics. The heart and soul of the company is the Multi-Plus, our big inverter charger range. And that is the foundation of most Victron systems. But from there, well, how do you get power into the battery? Because something needs to power the inverter charger. Well, then you go to batteries. Well, some of our customers need batteries. We don't always have clear supply lines. So we've been selling an increasingly large amount of batteries. And we also are able to supply in places that others can't, with supply consistency that others can't. So even though we might not necessarily be the most competitive in some markets, in some ranges of products, people will still choose us because we're reliable as a partner. So that's also a merit. And then, what else connects? We need something to charge the battery. Well, you can use an inverter charger. If you've got a generator connected, we don't sell generators. We have generator partners. And you can also then use PV. So, and the history of the solar charge controllers inside Victron, it's a relatively new product for our range. It's not like the power electronic inverter charger range or the inverters. And Philips, which was a very famous Dutch company, they had a suite of engineers that were out there working on charge controller technology.
Really?
And they never released it to market. And they decided they didn't want to pursue it anymore. So Victron scooped them up, engineer and all, and then bought the department. And then that became the foundation of our MPPT tech. And that is now, in my opinion, cutting edge. There's lots of good MPPTs in the market, and some which are better in some dimensions than ours. But in terms of our range and our price and our performance and our ecosystem, we're hyper competitive.
You've also got solutions which suit the Australian regulations, like the fact that you've got a galvanically isolated, relatively high voltage DC input RS450, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that product, I mean, it was a torturous process to get there, right? Like,
Yep.
we had sold these MPPTs into the market for many, many years. I wasn't aware of any safety issues at all. I don't think I've ever heard of any deaths associated with any Victron product regarding solar. And so there was no issue from our perspective. And then the imposition of some uniquely Australian requirements regarding PV installations, and specifically around isolation between battery voltages and PV, and also at what voltages you need to have a fault alarm protection from PV into the system. And our existing range didn't match that. So there was a really awkward, if anyone was dealing with Victron at the time, really awkward period there where we didn't have good answers to not very good questions.
Nor did anyone.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I mean, you operate in those conditions quite a bit in this market because we have a global product.
Yeah.
We comply as best as we can with all standards or relevant standards. They are European-based. For a European-based company, so they start with the IECs.
Yeah.
And often the way the standards work is most countries' standards are derivatives and interpretations and regional specific adaptations to those IEC standards. They often form the foundation, and then there's some modification that happens for a regional base. And sometimes those are no longer then compliant. You know, it's not necessarily backwardsly compatible, and so it might require extra efforts.
Sometimes it goes the other way. So ASNZS 5033 was the first national PV array standard in the world. It then got adopted by the IEC.
Oh, that's good.
So IEC 62548 is actually based on 5033.
Yeah, it's an installation standard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also relevant.
Yeah.
I'm more, and sometimes we get caught up by that. So there's, I understand it, of course, you're much more familiar with all this than me, but there's product standards and then there's installation standards.
Yeah.
And often they'll feed back on each other, they'll refer to each other. And so we are much more closely aligned with the product standards and that process of making sure the product is compatible with the standard and the approvals and then the certificates and then the recognition of those certificates in each regional area. And then usually there's an entity like in Australia, the CEC, who will then take that reference list and then make another list of their own approved products. And then that then feeds into some other scheme or whatever requirement that's happening in another standard or within a government program. So it's quite a long chain.
Yeah.
And often it's frustrating for everybody in terms of getting products that are very clearly defined as within the scope and here's how you install them for these conditions. That just the way the standards roll out, the way the products have to be adapted and the way the market responds, there can often be a very large period in the middle there where installers are trying to do the right thing, but it's not clear to them how to do it. Us as a manufacturer trying to do the right thing, but it's not necessarily straightforward with how we get from here to there. And we're often quite dependent on third parties once we've built the product to make sure that we're compatible and compliant. And sometimes that means feeding back to make an adjustment, either to firmware, especially in the case of inverter chargers and grid code controls. Like that's another thing that's adapting over time every few years now. Actually, every few months now, globally. Let's be kind.
Regions A, B, C. We'll have Z soon,
boy.
Don't you worry.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But if you're familiar with Victron equipment, charging inverter charger, there's a long list there.
Yeah.
Possible grid codes. It's not just Australia A, B, C. There's also Belgium, Austria, South Africa, America. All of them.
Which is your favourite?
I don't choose. I like the others. Yeah. So look, all of that aside, all of the standards and stuff aside, we are working closely with our partners in Australia to make sure they have a product range that's suitable.
Yep.
That can sometimes mean they lose products, and that's a global reality. There's some markets where some products are not suitable and not available and not the right thing. And look, as a broader example, Australia's done very, very well. Like Australia has an enormous range of products available on a global standard. So you have half a dozen to a dozen good quality lithium battery suppliers you can choose from in Australia. You have umpteen, although fluctuates, PV suppliers into Australia, all of which are standards compliant, with the, again, quite strict Australian rules. And you had quite a big range of power electronics as well. Countries like America with their UL system means they're quite an enclosed little loop, and they lose a lot of products because they're not compliant. Now, Victron has still supported those markets because often those standards are professional standards, and there's an emerging DIY market as well. And like, sale of our products is not controlled. It's the installation of them that's usually regulated. So it's possible for a DIY person to still get access to products. We're not locked out of markets usually as such. It's whether you can comply with this installation standard as a professional, or whether you can satisfy a government scheme to receive a subsidy or some other, support that makes you competitive in the market. So the DIY market, with the explosion of internet connectivity and training, YouTube training as well, and I think just part of the renewable energy ethos, it is encouraging of people to be empowered and to like take responsibility and do it themselves. So we are seeing a lot of growth in DIY. And that's, that has big pros and cons as a manufacturer. Like, that's not our model. We didn't start the business to sell to DIY, far from it. We started to sell to well-trained, competent, professional installers and for them to distribute our products. But just with the way things have gone in the world, it is now an undeniable part of that market.
I should kind of move a little bit towards the reach that Victron has in terms of, like you mentioned, the US and Australia, but it's probably the most available product on the planet in terms of renewable energy products.
I know of no bigger reach and no more markets supported. So on a country by country basis, absolutely. I think we're available in almost every country in the world. I get a unique view. So being a community manager, I get to see metrics about where people are accessing information from. And I have people who are completing training in the Republic of the Congo. I've got people in Bhutan doing online training with Victron products. I've got people all over the world who are tapping into us to get access to this information. And we're more than happy to sell products into those markets, and often are suitable for a whole range of conditions.
Anything in Antarctica?
Yes, we have products in Antarctica.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. We have products as well. Yeah, everywhere. It's hard to get away from them. It's one of those funny sleeper products, actually. Like, there's a lot of Victron stuff in a lot of places you'd never expect it. It's usually behind a, cabinet or something like that.
Yeah.
I was in the airport once, killing some time on a trip, and I look up, and there's enormous movable things that drag big screens in the airport to shade when there's those enormous windows. And up in the little corner, and airport roofs, they're like enormous, a little blue Victron box. And so we're the power supply that's driving this enormous shade screen thing across. And you'd never think, like, no one else knows, like, even catch their eye, but we are embedded in a whole range of products and industries. And that's really, like, we love it. We love that. We love being in the billionaires' boats as well as in the DIY camper. That's part of their strength.
It's a very big part of your market is the DIY indeed. So just coming back to, you mentioned your role as community manager. So explain that.
Sure. So when I was working at Rainbow, and I started doing Rainbow Power Company, I was trying to find out more about these products.
For those who don't know Rainbow Power Company, tell us who they are.
Okay, sure. So
it's a great story.
Rainbow Power Company is one of the longest running renewable energy installers in Australia. They're based out of Nimbin in northern New South Wales, which is a small, tiny little town. Rainbow Power Company itself started out of the back of a van at a market and grew to a main street, and Nimbin's a one-street town, grew to a main street shop. And has then grown to its own premises, and a great entrepreneurial business. It's a cooperative model. And
they're in the industrial area, and they got to name their street.
They did, we're at One Alternative Way, Nimbin. So that's one of the benefits of building a road. You get to name it. So the company's a cooperative style model. It's a public company. You can buy shares in it, but the shareholder predominant are employees and ex-employees. So it's a different ethos to what you normally see in hyper-capitalistic businesses. So Rainbow is a great pathway, and Rainbow's cool, but there are other businesses in the renewable energy in Australia that are very similar in ethos. So they're willing to take on new people or people who are interested in the industry and believe in the vision and the potential of renewable energy, recognize that requires people, and recognize that people require training and time, and are willing to invest in people and to build that capacity up, not just to optimize for maximum profit. There are those businesses too, of course, in the industry that are maximizing profit, but there's also a very strong core of Australian community, I suppose, in this industry that believes in growth of this business through best practice, through training of people. And so, yeah, they gave me an opportunity to start up in the renewable energy industry with no, prior professional experience. And I loved it. I jumped straight in and, learned very, very quickly on the job in real world applications, doing all of that, designing systems. And then where I really found my strength was designing systems to design systems. So supporting other installers and other salespeople to design robust power systems, and using tools to support that process to get customers. Because one of the big issues with designing a renewable energy system is actually, what does this person need? Like it's an extractive process to try and draw out from them what they actually require. And it's a funny one, because it's like you have to a degree look into the crystal ball and work out, okay, well, this person's telling me this, but I also need to find out a bit about their plans for the next few years, next decade even, in a renewable off-grid system. Like it's a long-term project, long-term commitment. So what's that look like? Well, is there an EV in the future? You want to know that before you're committing to a design. And so that process of doing that, I did that for 5 years, meant that I honed my skill and systems in terms of getting the information I needed, adapting it to what's available on the market, and then communicating that to the customer, and then supporting that system and that customer in the long tail of that system. So that was sort of my role in Rainbow. And then through that process, discovered that, well, there's all these repetitive questions coming up over and over and over again from Victron. And I had the knowledge at that point that I could contribute a bit back. So I started to contribute, found gaps in the system, of course. It's a complex system. There's lots of gaps in Victron. And so found those, and then began to either patch them up where I could, for my own purposes and own satisfaction, but also then feed back into the company. And what I discovered was that they were incredibly receptive to good feedback. So not necessarily positive feedback, but well-crafted, cutting, accurate feedback was received and then acted upon. And like, as a consumer who grew up in, the 2000s, the 1990s and the 2000s, having a company, like if I don't like the taste of Coca-Cola, I can't go to the CEO of Coca-Cola and say, hey, it's a bit sweet. Can you just tone it down? Like, it's never happening, right? Having a company that operated at this scale where you could feed back information and then sometimes like the same day, but sometimes within weeks and sometimes within the next product cycle, see your contributions and your suggestions shaping and forming where that product went to better fit the market. To me, I found that that's incredibly gratifying to me. Like, that's a very satisfying thing to do. I'm not satisfied with just taking what's sort of given and then, putting it in the slot. Like, it would fit better if it went like this, actually. And having that ability to shape and have it
Can you think of an example?
Well, I've got a funny example, actually. I'll give you the funny one and then I'll tell you a serious one, I guess. So one of the issues that I had was, and still have, was how do you get the information that people need to them where they're at that time, right? So if you're a customer and you've got a problem with your system, right, and it comes up and it says PV error. Well, what do you do? Like, what's the next step in that situation? It says there's an error. You may or may not perceive there's an error or something that's going on there. What's the next step? Now, most people are going to look for a phone number to call and someone to pick up on the phone and say, hey, it says PV error. What does that mean? Can I help you? That's not a very scalable solution, right? So Victron being a 100-person company and wanting to maintain this structure that allows us to have direct contact with the CEO, allows the CEO to have direct contact with all the employees, means we can't have 500,000 people around the world directly employed by us to service those inquiries. So we need to find ways that are going to scale that solution. So one of the things I did, Victron uses some open source tools like GitHub. All right, so if anyone's familiar with programming, GitHub's a place to store code, and you can also comment on code and also raise issues on projects, basically. So we have open source tools and open source software. So I was able to go onto GitHub and say, hey, I think it'd be a great idea if instead of when this user gets an error message, instead of just getting an error code number, that you can tap the error code number and it takes you to the documentation where it describes what the problem is and what they can do about it, right? Just simple little hit steps like that. Well, that came back to me. One of the suggestions that I put up was then years later assigned to me to do once I became a Victron employee. So I've actually been generating work for myself now for 4 years, putting forward ideas from when I was in the industry, thinking, oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That are now coming full circle, and I actually get to implement them myself.
That's great. Contextual help.
Yeah, that's one of the things. That's just one of the things. And like for me, I can see that becoming a rich and deep experience for people, not just, what's the error code, but learning about energy. Like that's what it fundamentally comes down to. And for an installer, learning about energy is going to mean something very, very different to the end user home occupier, but they need to both have some awareness of what is energy and how does it relate to them. And that to me should be a fun process, right? Like I learned a bit about energy in school, but it wasn't at a level that was relevant to me, right? Very. I learned about it as a physics concept, right? But what we have now is an enormous growth in gamification and understanding what people like, and like just seeing the way phone apps and like addictive game technology, poker machines and stuff like that. Like there's patterns in there that we can use for beneficial outcomes. Like, and one of those things is becoming energy literate. So finding ways to make it fun to use the product. Yeah, that's like an innovative, kind of radical solution in power electronics. I don't think most people optimize for fun.
I can think of a visual example is the Color GX.
Yeah.
It's visually literate.
Yeah.
In terms of energy flow, I without bias, I'd say it's the best user interface for an energy system on the market.
Warms my heart.
Yeah, it is. Like you don't have to explain it to people. They stand in front of it and they see a symbol for a battery which they recognise because it looks like a car battery. They can see little dots moving in a certain direction, like charge or discharge. They can see the components in their system, like the grid, the inverter, even the lights on the inverter correspond. And you can pick up PV, MPPTs and AC coupled systems and show them as discrete.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very, very all-in-one solution.
The good news on that, I mean, it doesn't stop, right? So we're the model of the company, the ethic of the company is we're not going to rest on the laurels. We push forward and constantly find the areas where we're the market leader and maintain that lead and keep pushing out. So a new feature you may or may not know about from Victron that's just come out quite recently is widgets on the phone. So people have already got their mobile phone. If they've already got a GX device, which is our Servo GX is the main leader in that range, and that's connected to the internet, then you can now on your home screen have your power system as a widget. So you don't even need to open an app or anything. It's just on the phone. So when you open it up, you just see your power system there, how much power you're consuming, how much is in the battery, what the sun's done today, and that sort of stuff.
So you don't have to go to VRM and log in?
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's all managed within that phone. And that brings that awareness just a little bit closer to people because they'll tap the phone, they'll turn it on, they want to check their email or their Twitter or whatever they want to do on their phone.
Yeah.
They got to look at their system. They don't need to go out of their way. It's elegant to look at. It's nice and neat. We'll show some photos.
What's it called?
Well, it's a widget. So it's part of the VRM app. So if you download VRM and you've got VRM on there, once you've got VRM, then you can add a widget to your phone, and then it's in that widgets list.
Oh, wow.
And then you can open that up and drag it. We've got all different sizes, depending how much it is. You can start your generator from it. You can use it to start charging your electric car from it if you've got an EV charging station connected, or within that existing comfort zone, let's say, of a person's home screen. Yeah.
I felt a twitch then to go and reach for my phone.
Yeah, have a little look see.
But we'll pop it on the screen so people can see what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's kind of a good segue to what's new.
Right.
And it's sort of kind of sitting there on a table.
One of them. Yeah. I mean, it's a good story behind this product as well. The way Victron products are usually developed, the way most of them are developed is, do we sell one already? Can we make a bigger one? Can we make a smaller one? And that's how you get the range that it's extended as far as it has. Every so often we'll do some new R&D efforts. And in fact, we've got half a dozen products in the pipeline that may never see the light of day, right? We're an R&D company at its core, and very often products, for lots of reasons, don't become commercially viable that reach full production. There is another option that comes about every so often, and this is an example of it, where someone in Victron has a need, and because they have the access and the resources and the skills that they've developed inside the company, will develop a product themselves on their weekends and afternoons, and then get it to such a stage where it becomes a realized product. So this EV charging station is the brainchild of Lucian, who's a Romanian sales manager. He's got a programming bent, and he's got an electric car. And he wanted to be able to use the surplus power from his power system. So if he's got excess PV during the day, and either begins to export it to the grid, or if his batteries are full, then he wants to take that surplus and use it to charge the car. So he then started to develop a product that would do that for him. And this is the result of that that's now commercially realized. So
can I hold it just to show the viewers?
Yep, you can
turn it around.
Pop the front on. So there's two models, Glenn. So this is the first model, and this is based off a 3D printed case. So it's part of a prototyping process. We also have a sleeker model, which is the same hardware
internally, but is better suited to outdoor conditions and looks more elegant, less.
So this is the
Victron?
indoor unit.
It's IP44 rated.
44.
So
Okay.
it's
under shelter.
carport.
Carport.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. So you don't want it to be in the rain full bore.
Yeah.
But you also don't want it to be. It's practical, right? It has to be practical. So
And it's got a screen.
yeah, and the similar interface that you were describing before with the GX.
Yes.
So you'll be able to see how much power is coming in from the PV, where it's going to the car, how much is coming into the car, and so forth into that.
And this is the most popular connector in Australia, the Type 2.
It's the global choice, I think. If you had to pick one, that's the one we chose.
Yep.
So you'll need an adapter cable between that port and your car.
Yep.
And then from there, what this unit does is it receives information from the GX device if there's surplus PV available and how much that is. This device then translates that information through to the car, and then the car sends a signal how much it wants to draw, and then it'll draw it, and the system will supply it and monitor it for you.
Now, can we look inside the unit?
Flip it over. I took the case off the back. So have a look in the back.
One of my beefs actually is that everyone calls these EV chargers, as we just did, because marketing always wins, right?
Yeah.
So marketing calls them chargers, we call them chargers. But actually, if you look inside here, it's actually just a electric, socket outlet with some smarts.
Yes, exactly.
So,
it's control circuitry, but not transformation. It's not doing anything.
It's not doing any
supply.
transformation. So it's not actually a charger because that's in your car.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So this is taking AC power, and then ultimately has to get to DC power at some point in the battery. But that process from AC to DC happens inside the vehicle.
That's right. So this has got a contactor for disconnecting it, but the circuit board, which is what you were describing, is that this was where the kind of the magic happens.
Yeah, that's the product. That's the that's the intellectual property of it, I suppose. That's the R&D that's gone into it, and the R&D that continues to go into it, because that process of translating that information to cars and back again. Well, there's always new cars coming onto the market. There's a standard which is followed, but as we know with standards, there's different interpretations and implementations of a standard. So you need to be able to tweak and control that and improve that. And then it also needs to be able to improve its relationship with the rest of the ecosystem. So for instance,
so it supports the industry standard OCPP.
Yeah,
which I don't even know what it stands for.
No, me either.
Open something, I think. But anyway, it's kind of so that cars can talk to supply equipment.
Exactly.
And if you look here, there's big pins and little pins. And the little pins are basically the communication pins with the vehicle.
Still pretty big for communication pins, I have to say, but that's you need that robustness for a vehicle.
There's only two of them, so it's pretty simple. But effectively, the car wants to say how fast it wants to be charged, what its capabilities are. But with the smart charger, you can do this solar optimization.
That's right. That's the difference, and that's what the specialty is. I mean, this isn't a product for everybody. The people who are going to want this product already have a Victron system. They're already in the Victron lifestyle. And they want it to then extend to their vehicle, which is enough people to make this a very popular product. We had a lot of inquiries for it, and now it's arrived. We're getting a lot of inquiries about it.
Let me give you a scenario. So let's say you've got a battery system, you've got solar, and you've got some multi-plus inverters. Well, they're single or three phase. Can you sequence it so it will charge from solar first, then battery, and then finally, if you have a backup generator or if you're grid connected, you can use that?
You can. So the most common application for this sort of product will be, okay, I just want my surplus to go into the vehicle. But sometimes that's not going to be good enough. Either you're going to make a big trip, you don't have to wait for the sun to come out, you just want to charge it. You don't really mind if you're paying extra per kilowatt hour. And then you can override that built-in, just give me the surplus solar. Until you reach that surplus solar stage, well, the load that's not this, right, is a discretionary load. So the fridge, the lights, the internet, all those power points in the house, they're of course going to be prioritized first in a Victron system. So they'll get the power no matter what. Once those loads have been satisfied, if there's still surplus generation from a generator or from AC input from a grid or from PV, then that'll go into charging a battery. And so once the battery is then full, then you've got surplus to deal with. Well, that can be export. You could be sending that back out into the grid if you've got an ESS system and compliance and approval to do that export, or it could go to then discretionary loads. Now, that's already handled to a degree inside a Victron system with what we call our AC2. So there's a controllable contactor inside that product or inside the MultiPlus where you can turn on a large load. So okay, when my batteries are full, then I want to turn on my hot water heating. And I don't want to be able to run hot water heating until the batteries are full because you don't want to drain that core load of lights and fridge and internet to heat hot water. But that is a very binary operation. You're opening
contactor and you're closing it.
And a 3.6 kilowatt element comes on, or a 4.8.
Or a 22 point,
Yeah, right.
in the case of a car charger.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So yeah, it can be a very, very high demand appliance. And sometimes you'd want that, right?
Yes.
Like you get home, it's the middle of the night, you got an early morning meeting or whatever, you need to get back in the car, you want the car to be full no matter what, you whack it in, give me the full charge. And you can do that. You can say, just give it to me. I want the full whatever you've got written in there or whatever you've got designed in there in your circuit. But often, for most people, on a daily basis, they're only doing a fraction of the car's capacity anyway, right? An electric car battery is much like a house battery. You don't want to be hitting zero. You want to have enough buffer in there to always get you home. And in a battery bank in the house, you don't want the lights to be turning off each night. You want to have enough in there that you're cycling it not fully. And so having that buffer means you can then be a bit discretionary with when you absorb the power. You might do a bit of work, you might get home and take a bit from home or whatever. The future, of course, and the big vision of this, we've got these enormous batteries, right? These 25 to 100 kilowatt hour batteries on wheels. Why can't we use them as part of a fully integrated system, right? So when you've got a lot of surplus, you can charge the battery up. When you've got a deficiency, well, you can, discharge it. Or if there's like a peak demand event on the grid, well, export back to the grid, get paid for it. That's the big dream.
But this doesn't do
We're not there
bi-direction.
yet.
No.
We're not there yet.
Well, nor is the standards for it.
Exactly. No one's there yet. The
No one's
car's
there
not
yet.
there yet. The standard's not there yet. The equipment's not there yet.
Yeah.
But that's the vision, and that's the potential, and so that's why we're curious with products like this.
There is a halfway house. It's called vehicle to load.
Yes.
Which is where some of the vehicles like the Ioniq 5 and the Atto 3, there might be another, which has basically a 3.5 kilowatt 15 amp socket outlet.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. And we can start to do things with that because that then becomes it's not a fully dynamic system.
Yep.
But because you have control, and we have another new feature from Victron, although it's a bit on the down low, we're not necessarily promoting it, and we're definitely not supporting it as a company, but we're making it available and we're documenting it, and we're encouraging people who are at the edge, either with their application or implementation. But basically, it's a full PLC style. Would you like to tell the customer what PLC is? No, do you know that? All right, so PLCs are a programmable logic controller.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So it's basically a little computer which controls switches.
Yep.
And depending on which one you use, they're effectively Turing complete. So you can write programs in them that are unbounded. So you can do all sorts of complexity. You can say, look, if I'm going to check a weather API, if it's going to be raining in 3 days, well, I want my batteries to be at 80% now. I don't want them discharged below 50%. If the car comes on, only put the car on after the sun's been out for 3 hours, unless there's a storm coming. And if the storm comes, we'll then fill the batteries up to 100% because we might lose power. So that sort of complex flow is not available as part of the normal menu option inside a Victron product. It's too complicated.
Yep.
We have all of those at various stages, but if you actually want to start to program something more complicated, then we have a new interface called Node-RED. And you can access it through the firmware menu inside a Victron GX device. It's called Large, Venus OS Large.
Yep.
And then once you've got Venus OS Large turned on, then you can access Node-RED. And another one for the marine market called Signal K. It's a similar.
So Node-RED's an open platform for logic programming. So
exactly.
It's very drag and droppy.
Exactly. It's a visual interface. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you drag your charger onto a visual interface.
Yeah.
And then you can download widgets and say, well, I want a timer. I'll drag that over. I want to link this timer to this relay. You drag that over, and then it generates the code. So it's a very intuitive and easy to access tool set. And it's all, we get the benefit of that open source development by tapping into that standard.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So we have an HLC here.
Okay.
It's a human logic controller, which goes, I think it's going to be wet in 3 days' time. I think we won't use so much. And like you say, it's hard to predict all those things and manage it. So that's a great feature to have. So
it is. Look, but the HLCs have been doing a great job for a long time, and we're not making them redundant. They're an integral part of a Victron system. Long term, like where I see it going, is moving all the way to full AI and machine learning. So you've got this thing that's spewing out enormous quantities of data of currents, temperatures, voltages at various points in the system. And then you've got external data, weather, consumption, capacity, all of that happening as well. And there is scope in the stack now of software and hardware and internet integration to go, well, what's the best decision to make regarding this? And it's an untapped future area, but I think Victron is very interested in pursuing that area
of opportunity. It's not going to distract from the core business of making cool products and delivering them to market, but there is that potential in the future, and we're definitely not blind to it. We want to be embracing it.
So, for a PLC that might want to use weather data, you have another new product which allows it to go and get it directly.
Do we?
Yeah, well, basically connect to the internet.
Okay. Yes, we do. So I was wondering what you're alluding to then. It's funny you bring that the weather point. That weather, there's another data stream as well that's also very interesting and relevant, which is power cost. So we're having these variable grid costs being implemented all around the world, and that can also inform people's decisions. So we've got a few projects on the back burner. I got a bit of a peek at what's happening in the future, making the most of these other external data streams. But I think the one you're referring to is a new product we've got called the Global Link. Yeah, and the Global Link is a 5-year prepaid LTE-M modem that connects to our basic products. So the BMV, the Smart Shunt,
even the BMV,
the good old BMV.
It's one of my favorite little things.
It's a classic.
It's got like 66 programmable functions in it. It's only this big, a tiny screen connected to the shunt. It actually tells you so much, and it can control stuff. It's like your generator.
Yep. So we have the BMV, the battery monitor. We also have the Smart Shunt, which is the battery monitor without the screen. And the theory behind that product is most people have got a screen in their pocket anyway. So let's just use their phones as that interface. The small charge controllers, the solar charge controllers as well. And there's millions of these systems around the world. And how do we get people to get the most of what Victron has to offer, which is, a robust bit of hardware that they can rely upon. It does what it should. But what really makes Victron cool is the ability to get online and see that data and get history and monitor it remotely. And for a lot of people, the GX device, the Servo GX, was just too much power consumption for a small load application, too much money, too much complexity, too difficult to connect in some places. So we have these problems with the GX for these small applications. And the Global Link is the response to those issues. So it's very, very small. It's like a pack of Tic Tacs. It's a very, very light and low power consumption. It's very, very simple. There's no connectivity or configuration that needs to be done. It works out of the box in the regions that it works in. And you connect your charge controller and or your Smart Channel BMV via V-Direct. There's 3 V-Direct ports on the bottom. And then potentially an external antenna. It has a built-in antenna, but depending on if you're in a steel shed or something, you might need to put an external antenna on the roof. And then that will begin to push. It's a one-way street out. So unlike the GX, which is a two-way communication, it'll push that data out to the VRM. So you'll begin to get that system data on the internet.
And on your widget.
And on your widgets. Yeah. Now, it's like I said, it's power and data constrained. It's designed for these applications. So it's got a 10-minute refresh time. So you can get the GX device down to second refresh time with advanced tools, but commonly 15 minutes or 1 minute to user tools. This is only ever going to be 15 minutes, and you're never going to do firmware updates or change settings or anything like that. It's just to get that information onto VRM. Now, who it's going to be great for is people who are not that into their system potentially. They've got a vehicle or something like that where they've got a battery in it, and they just want to have that available for history purposes. We're seeing great interest from integrators. So people who are selling batteries, they can tuck one of these in the back. It's very cheap. And then that will communicate to their head office how the battery's performing, whether it's being fully charged or discharged or not, and help them with warranty
I was going to say, this would be great for warranty issues where you can say, well, actually, you've abused the battery.
Here's the history. Yeah, well, we're not out to get anyone.
No.
We want people to have the data to be able to make the right decisions for their system. Yeah. And look, the problem with batteries are the only time the manufacturer or the supplier hears back is when there's a problem, right? So the battery's already failed at that point. It's too late.
Yep.
So there's actually an enormous window of opportunity between when the customer receives the battery, the abuse starts or the problem starts, if it's not willful, and then the battery will take it for a long time, right? You can really degrade and bash a battery and abuse it for a long time before it reaches point of failure. Now, when it reaches a point of failure, well, the customer's upset and they want their warranty battery back, and the manufacturer looks at it and says, well, you never fully charged it. You've had this thing for 18 months and it's never been charged. Well, that gap of 18 months when you're still in the warranty period could be addressed with a phone call after the first week if the customer, if the everyone knows what's going on with that history. So it gives an opportunity, I think, to not just protect themselves, but also give a better customer experience.
Yeah.
To actually make the whole thing.
Just going back a couple of steps, you said it's prepaid. So when you buy it, you don't have to have a plan.
Exactly. You buy the plan in the product. We buy it for you, basically.
Right.
So the time it first connects to the network, the clock starts to tick.
Yep.
And then you've got 5 years of operational use. Now, it's a SIM card in there.
Yep.
So, if you're very waste-minded, after 5 years, you might be able to pull the SIM card out and put another one in. I think we'll probably by then have an opportunity for people when at year 4.5 after the product's been released, we'll probably have something in the portal where you'll be able to buy extra time if necessary, or maybe that's enough and you've got what you needed or whatever else out of it. So, but anyway, the point was that the customer doesn't have to do anything, or the installer doesn't have to do anything. You have to plug it in, connect it, and you're away.
It's a budget monitoring solution.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Size of Tic Tac.
Yeah.
Right.
Tiny little box.
Little box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tiny
That's
little
pretty
box.
cool.
Yeah.
And it's powered just from the VE Direct.
No, it needs its own power supply.
Oh, okay.
It comes from a 12 volt. It's got a range, 8 to whatever it is, 8 to 48.
Oh, okay.
8 to 60 usually. In that
Yes,
setup.
yes.
Yeah. That's the input voltage. So it needs a bit of extra power. It's not really a good idea. You get 5 volts off the VE Direct ports.
Yep.
Not really a good idea to use that. It's not intended for any can draw device. So we've seen customers attempt to hook up USB charging. It's not going to work. Yeah.
I remember once learning that there was a certain amount of voltage on a telephone line.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can charge my house batteries off that. No.
You can get an electric shock though. So
Yeah, especially when they ring.
Yeah,
the ringtones go down.
Yeah, then you get a cop.
There's 48 volts.
Yeah, then you get a cop.
Wow, we've covered a lot of territory of products that are available now, but what's coming?
Look, the big, other than these ones which are now market ready, the next thing on the horizon, the most popular product we've got inquiries about, is our new 3-phase all-in-one product, basically. So one box which handles all 3 phases. So until now, you've needed to use 3 multi-pluses, connect them with a VE bus cable, and then program them as a 3-phase system. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity in that and a lot of potential for things to go wrong and a lot of weight and, surplus wiring that needs to happen. We're going to bring that into one 3-phase model, and it's going to be rack mountable. So you'll be able to put your lithium batteries in the rack, and then above them, whack the inverter in that rack as well. So bringing all of that, what is usually quite a large footprint and complexity of installation in those bigger systems, which we're seeing a lot more of. Systems just getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year, making that a much more manageable operation. So instead of being, the Quattro 15K, that's a 89 kilogram product, right?
Yep.
It's struggling with a 2-person lift there. You're looking at a 3-person, 4-person mechanical lift, and then you need 3 of them. So it's quite a big operation to get a top-end Victron 3-phase system. Moving that into something that's manageable by 1 person into a rack. So it's dramatically cutting down the weight, dramatically cutting down the complexity, massively increasing the power density and the efficiency of that operation into one.
And is that for a nominal 48 volts battery system?
No. Well, this is the thing. So no, it's a lot of power, right? So
a lot of power.
A lot of power. And one of the issues we're hitting at Victron is people want the biggest system possible. We currently top out at 180 kilowatts.
Yes.
Yeah, which is a big system, but it's not big enough for some. And at 48 volt, it's an enormous amount of current.
Yeah.
Massive current to deal with. So a lot of issues with wiring and getting circuits and switches and fuses and everything balanced and safe is hard. So we're moving to I don't know exactly what voltage rating we're going to decide on, somewhere between 500 and 800 volts. And again, that has its own issues, right? That's a very dangerous...
It's a lot of torch batteries connect in series. Yeah.
A very, very dangerous voltage range.
Yeah.
Fatal. Like a 48 volt battery, it's dangerous, but it's not necessarily a fatal shock.
It's burns, not shock.
Exactly. Burns, not shocks, and fires as well. But 800 volt for surely will cause you grievous bodily harm.
One flash in your ash. Yeah.
That's a cute one. So it's very important that is managed safely, and that's also part of the consideration of having it in a cabinet.
Yeah.
So that the 800 volt battery voltage is all contained within a sealed unit that can then be locked, and safe. It's very hard to, I'm sure anyone who's tried to do big systems, you're effectively building a room to contain that equipment when you're starting to work at those high voltages. And that's obviously got massive cost and complexity as well. Being able to contain that in a cabinet makes a lot of sense. So then you're just dealing with the 240, the 415 3-phase coming out of that system.
Yeah. Yeah, so with those sort of voltages, your currents drop, so all your componentry can be smaller. Is it still going to be galvanically isolated, or will it be a transformerless?
It's transformerless. It will be galvanically isolated. Hey, it's also got MPPTs in the same platform.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
32 kilowatt of PV can go into the MPPT in this
So
rack,
it's got an MPPT and an inverter.
and an inverter charger. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're familiar with our range, we've got the Multi RS,
Yeah.
which is a new product to market. Not widely seen yet due to a lot of compliance necessities, but beginning to emerge and definitely available from us. And that new product, it's the third generation basically of Multi Plus we're selling. So we've got the existing Multi Plus, which is now a 15-year-old product. We've got the Multi Plus 2, which is now a 5-year-old product. And then we've got the Multi RS, which is now a 12-month-old product. And each of these represent the needs of a different market. So if you're going to Antarctica, you're probably going to take the 15-year-old, battle-tested, extremely well-defined, all hardware adjustments and refinements made to that product. It's been in the field for that long in all conditions. People who want that reliability and want that track record will go for that older product, and we continue to supply it. But unfortunately, the market's changed, and the Multi Plus is no longer suitable for all applications. So we've got the Multi Plus 2. So where you need things like double-acting internal relays for AS4777 and other regional grid controls, we've moved to a SMB, which is a surface-mounted deposition process, which is how they build the circuit boards. From instead of being very large, chunky chips and circuit boards that were available 10 years ago, we've now moved to a much smaller circuit board design, which has cost savings and efficiency improvements. But then, that's still a transformer-based unit. Like the fundamental full FET-bridge topography of that design is still the same as the Multi Plus. The Multi Plus and the Multi Plus 2 are fundamentally very similar in their electrical topographical layouts. Then we've got the high-frequency unit, the RS, where the toroidal transformer is done away with, and we're using high-frequency switching to get the sine wave and reduce cost, reduce weight, improve efficiency, and also do things like full galvanic isolation from PV at high voltage, which is something the market demanded. So,
wow.
Yeah. So we've got this range of products coming in, and as the RS range becomes more mature inside, we start to see the potential. We could never get 3 toroidal transformers that were required for the 3-phase unit into that product, into a rack. It's just physically impossible. You couldn't fit them. But with this space constraint and saving of the RS design, we can start to explore those products and those opportunities for new markets.
Wow. It's amazing what you can miniaturize when you go to high frequency, high voltage.
It's unbelievable.
At the All Energy show we just been at, I saw a 1 megawatt inverter, the size of a bar fridge.
Unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, the power that's coming is, I mean, for anyone who's been in the industry, they've seen that progression of a 5-watt solar panel to a 50-watt solar panel to a 500-watt solar panel, right? And they've seen how that's happened. Well, the same thing's happening in reverse in power electronics, right? So we've gone from what was quite a dodgy, expensive, inefficient process that generated a square wave to all the way to megawatts in bar fridges that are generating beautiful, perfecting sine waves and everything in between. And that process of efficiency, I think, is something which drives us as a renewable industry forward, because we see we are enabled every year by better and better technology to actually make a real difference in the world. We don't need to use the 100-year-old, the 200-year-old technology that's provided to us through a mains grid and through a mains generation supply. We're now starting to see, started with real enthusiasts at the edges, people like Rainbow Power Company, who are doing off-grid systems well before it made sense, just because that's what they wanted to do, to now homeowners looking at the grid, looking at their off-grid solution and saying, well, maybe we can just do the off-grid system, and then maybe choosing something in between and just getting a trickle or no power from the grid, using it as a generator backup effectively, and having batteries and PV on the roof. And then now we're starting to see bigger commercial industrial applications where they're looking at the costs and going, well, we can run a generator, we can pull in 200 kilowatts, whatever from the grid, or we can handle it all on site. We can have backup supplies. We can have redundancy. We can have the benefits of renewable generation. We can have the cost savings. It's just growing and growing and providing more and more solutions to bigger parts of the market. And there's no signs that that's going to slow down anytime soon.
Hey, you reminded me of one fun fact. I think you know this one. That actually, I did my training with Rainbow Power Company back last century with Peter Pedals.
Oh my god!
And
amazing.
I really appreciated his knowledge and the example that Rainbow Power Company sort of showed. And they really walked the talk. The fact that in the factory there was part of the building actually contained the waste from the previous manufacturing processes. So there was jars of copper sulfate solution embedded in the mud brick walls.
Rainbow's got an amazing story, because when they started, there were no commercially available inverters, and a lot of products weren't available, and so they did it anyway. And often that meant, like, for a long time, manufacturing their own water turbines to satisfy the opportunities that were available in our valley to harvest hydro. So, like, hydro is a weird sort of, it's a weird power supply. It's one of the biggest renewable energy generators in the world, but often it's monopolized and constrained within very limited geographical regions, usually at great environmental cost, but not necessarily. There are a bunch of micro hydro sites for people that have chosen to live strategically in the mountains, but getting the service to those people was, there was no market commercially for it. So Rainbow had to make it.
The Pelton wheel.
Yeah, we had to build the Pelton wheels and the integration systems to get the voltages right and everything else. So they really have been through that full cycle from like the beginning of, like, we have a problem and a solution. How do we meet them in the middle with technology? And now, well, they're an integrator. Like, you have to be commercially. Manufacturing your own inverters is a very, it's not something you do in your backyard shed anymore.
There's actually a Rainbow Power Pelton wheel in the valley behind me, which I've done some work on.
There you go. And, still ticking.
It's still ticking. I think the only complaint I had from the customer was it makes a bit of noise.
Yeah, it does.
And they always have too much power.
Well, you need a dump. You need a dump load.
You need dump loads.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. We've got, it's not an unavailable product, but like Victron appeals to those. The kind of people that like micro hydro often will gravitate towards Victron. We have a similar ethos in some ways. And we have something in the future for those people too.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's good. Cool. Well, look, I really enjoyed chatting with you, Guy. It's been fascinating, and the new products. This one really gets me excited because I'm into EVs and self-use is what it's all about. So thanks for bringing that along.
No, good to have it out in the market. It's a product that's meeting its market, and happy to have it.
Cool. Right. And big thank you to Victron for all the support. You most notice quite a lot of blue stuff behind me. There's actually a lot of real blue stuff being used here at the lab, so doing good work. So thank you, Victron.
No, it's a pleasure. Of course, we love getting. You're an educator, and that's really close to what we want to do. We're like, that's the driver of our business, making sure people get educated in the products. And our business philosophy is, once they learn, they'll come to Victron. That's where they'll end up. So part of the process is making sure that great resources are available to the public through educators like yourself. So
thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for doing what you do. And thanks for everyone who watches and installs this gear. Yeah.
Well, let's hope you can get home with the rock falls and slips on the road.
It's getting darker out there, isn't it?
Yeah, my God. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Cool.
Great. Yeah. Good.